ways you can work around things to improve things, and it just seems like they're not trying to do that.
I think they're a good unit, obviously led by Victor Wembanyama.
Experience as a good head coach, like in the past 12 years ago when they won the Super Bowl.
52 to 38 in an absolute thriller. Play after play. Touchdown after touchdown.
My family was just in complete disappointment.
Wanted to be a Philly, which is insane.
We saw the big thing after we first drafted him was that three-point shot. Obviously, he's drained that down, so we can't even really complain.
My team, so it's been really cool.
I'm definitely not a special guest. I'm a guest on a special podcast. That's what it is.
Yo, what's good, ladies and gentlemen? Hope you all are doing well here on this Sunday afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of Two Mics All Sports. I'm your host, Zachary J., joined by a special guest, Kenny Frankowitz. What's going on, man?
Chilling, excited.
So in today's video, we're going to be giving you guys our WBC Preview and Predictions. But before we get started, we're just going to go over a quick overview of each pool, the teams that consist of it, and based off what happens in those pools, what will transpire in the quarterfinals. So first and foremost, in Pool A, the games that we played in San Juan is Canada, Colombia, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Panama. Then when it goes to Pool B, the games that will be played in Houston, we have Brazil, Great Britain, Italy, Mexico, and USA. And then in Tokyo, the teams that will be playing there are Australia, Chinese, Czech, Japan, and Korea. And then Pool D in Miami will be the Dominican Republic, Israel, the Netherlands, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. But after all that, what will transpire after that is basically the winner or the second remaining seed of the Pool A will play the winner of Pool B, and then transpiring to that, the winner of Pool B will play the last remaining team in the Pool A, and the same thing will transpire in Pool C and Pool D. But just looking at it early on, Kenny, how are you feeling, and are there any dark horse teams that you think potentially can make a run to this quarterfinals?
So yeah, I've been doing a lot of research on this. Obviously, I'm looking forward to it. We don't get it that often. So, obviously, the heavy hitters are going to be USA, Japan, and the Dominican Republic, as always. But I think there's a few teams that you can keep an eye out for. I really like Venezuela. I think they're a really good team. I think Mexico is pretty good. Puerto Rico, they don't have what they had a few years ago, but there was a lot of insurance problems going on with the MLB teams and letting some of their certain players come over and play for their country and for, things like that. But I just think that they're still a very good team. I think Puerto Rico can make a run. I think Canada's very good. I think this World Baseball Classic is going to be a lot more interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's like you bring up Mexico, which Mexico was that team last year that was like obviously Randy Arozarena headlined, but they also had a lot of guys on that team, and they were a team that was towards the very end. And then obviously the Japans and the USAs. But then I like how you're talking about the Dominican Republic isn't going to be there in the sense because they don't have the same players that they did.
I was talking Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, Puerto Rico, they don't have some of the same players they did a few years ago. So now the question remains is what new team will take their place and step up? I think it's gonna be interesting to see. I like a team that I'm looking at Pool D in Miami. I like a lot of teams in there. I think Venezuela definitely is a very underrated team. I like what they have there. And then obviously you have the Netherlands. It's always interesting to see what they bring to the table. And I just think as a whole, I think easily the the biggest pool without a doubt is the Pool B with Houston, because you have USA, Mexico, Italy, Great Britain, and Brazil. I think although USA is the favorite in that pool, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what transpires, especially the team that would finish second in that pool and would have to face the top team in Pool A.
Yeah, that's a great pool. I really do like Pool B. Also, Italy is very interesting. They have a lot of good players.
Yeah, and then just I guess looking at in another sense, I think Pool C in Tokyo. I think Japan. It's an easy. I wouldn't say it's a runaway for them, but they definitely have the advantage. I think over everyone else in that sense, and I think it's gonna be very tough to stop them in a sense because they were the reigning champions. Now more than ever, they have more players that have come over to the MLB, so they're more adjusted to the style of playing. And I think just as a whole, it's like you look at the USA's, you look at the Japan, they're obviously the favorites in this because of the talent they bring to the table. But I think it's in the sense where it's like you never know what's going to happen on a collective basis. You could have the most loaded roster, but there's a team that comes out of nowhere and just has enough firepower on that certain day to knock you out. And just because you're not like favored in a pool, if you perform well in a few games, you're the leader of that pool and you're going on to the quarterfinals and you have the momentum building. So, but let me ask you this then. We talk about some dark horse teams. Obviously, USA, Japan are the top, and then there's some other teams like you mentioned the Puerto Rico, and then I think within the sense where it's like I like the Netherlands. I think they could be very dark horse, and then obviously you have the Pool B. Obviously USA headlines it, but I like a team like Mexico. Obviously, I wouldn't consider them a dark horse, but at the same time, it's like I think they easily could finish second, but they also could finish lower than that. But let me ask you this in the sense: what teams are you looking at that could possibly be favored in their pools, but possibly not even make it to the quarterfinals or make it and be an early exit?
So I think when you talk about that, any pool that's really going to be close with the winner, I think I turn my eyes to Pool A, just because there's not that many powerhouses on those teams. I mean, the two favorites in that pool I would say would be Canada and Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, they kind of lack on the starting pitching. I think they're led by Seth Lugo. And other than that, when you turn to their bullpen, they have Edwin Diaz. So it's like, Seth Lugo, he can't go out there and throw every single game. So somebody in that rotation is going to have to step up. And then when I look towards Canada, I see that they have James Paxton and Jameson Taillon. James Paxton, he hasn't thrown an MLB game since 2024. And Jameson Taillon, he's a pretty solid pitcher in the MLB. But I mean, Paxton, he's a lefty, he's got the stuff. So I think pitching is really, really going to be like, I mean, I don't even think it's just a fact. They kind of say in like football, defense wins championships. It's kind of like pitching will win you championships in MLB and baseball in the whole. So I think anybody who has a favorable rotation or bullpen, that can take you a long way in this tournament. So I think one team to look out for is Canada in Pool A. I think they could be a dark horse winner for that pool. But I mean, I still wouldn't doubt Puerto Rico. They have a good pair at catching with Maldonado and Christian Vasquez. They have Nolan Arenado, who's obviously playing for them this year. Heliot Ramos, Willie Castro, and then they're coached by Yadier Molina. So like that's a pretty good team, and they're like that's brotherhood over there. They stick together, they play well, they rally together. So I think that even though they lack a little bit of pitching, they can still come out of that pool and be on top. So that's going to be a close pool that I'm really interested in. I think when you look towards Pool B, I think the USA is a clear winner, and I think that Italy and Mexico are going to battle it out for the runner-up spot. And then turn it over here to Pool C, I think Japan is the clear winner. And then for the runner-up in that pool, it's going to be very interesting because I don't really have a pinpoint prediction that who can be the runner-up for that pool. I think it's up in the air, and like you said, whoever starts clicking, they'll probably come away with that runner-up spot. And then Pool D is also going to be very, very interesting because the Dominican Republic is very, very stacked on all sides of the baseball. But when you look at teams like you're a big fan of the Netherlands, I think, they have some star power with Ozzy Albies, Xander Bogaerts, Jurickson Profar, even Drew Jones, a top prospect or a former top prospect in baseball, high draft pick. And you look at Venezuela, who can literally go neck and neck with Dominican Republic on any day of the week, I think, with Ranger Suarez and Eduardo Rodriguez in the rotation. William Contreras, in my opinion, probably the best catcher in baseball. I mean, I know that may be a hot take, but I think, in my opinion, he's probably the best catcher in baseball. And then they also have Salvador Perez, great leadership. And then you look in the infield with Wilson Contreras, Luis Ariz, Miguel Garcia had a great season this past year for the Royals. Eugenio Suarez, Gleyber Torres, Ezequiel Tovar. And then you look at their outfield. Jackson Chourio, Ronald Acuna, Wilyer Abreu. I think Venezuela could very, very well win that pool. But I think there's no way that the Dominican Republic won't come out of that pool. I think they'll 100%. If not win it, they'll be the runner-up. But that leaves a great team like the Netherlands. Like I said, I already pointed out some of their star power. I just think that, yeah, they're a great team, but I don't know if they'll be able to come out of that pool. But that's going to be one to keep your eye on for sure. I feel like we could have an early exit like you've been talking about in that pool.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I like it in the sense where I think Pool D, without a doubt, is going to be the most competitive. I think these teams are all up in the air. They all collectively have good rosters, but then you bring it up, Dominican Republic and Venezuela, I think easily had the best two rosters, and I think when those two match up, it's going to be a war of attrition. Like those two teams are going to be battling. I think whoever wins that game will get the top of their pool, and then the other one will be battling it out with the rest of the teams. But then, like you said, I think it could be the Netherlands. It could be another team in that pool that emerges as that second team. I think it's going to be a battle between Venezuela and Dominican Republic to get that first. But when it comes down to the second, that's where I think the battle will even evolve more to where it is now. And it's like these teams, like for example, like Dominican Republic, they have like great players like Chris Sanchez. They have other guys like you said, Dominguez. They have Camilo Duval, Estevez, and stuff like that. And then they have Sandy Alcantara, and then also guys like Manny Machado. I don't know, is Ketel Marte slated to play because I know he's been hurt.
So right here I have in their infield, Ketel is going to be on the roster. They also have Vlad Junior Caminero, Geraldo Perdomo, Jeremy Pena, Ahmed Rosario, and Carlos Santana.
Yeah, I would think without a doubt. And then it even evolves more into their outfield with O'Neal Cruz, Julio Rodriguez, Johan Rojas, Juan Soto, and Fernando Tatis Jr. Like I think they're easily the third best team in this entire slate of things. Like I think they should be considered with Japan and USA because they have a good roster. And it's like I know like they're not like USA and Japan have the history and stuff like that, but don't be surprised if Dominican Republic makes it out of this stage and gives, especially if they have to face Japan. I think that's a battle right there. It's possibly in the semifinals if they somehow face off. Because say Dominican Republic falls out of first place and falls to second place, the runner up in their pool, and has to face Japan in the next round. I think that's easily a great chance for them to win that game because although Japan has the history to back it up and they have the experience, this is a game by game system at this point. If your team comes out better that day, then they're going to win the game. And once you get out of the pool stage, I believe it's single elimination. So you don't play your best ball one day, and the other team's just going to beat you. Simple like that. So I think easily, Dominican Republic might not have the best roster compared to these teams, but I think they easily have the deepest roster. Because USA's roster is pretty deep, but I really like Dominican Republic's roster due to their versatility and where they can just play these players at. And like, although one guy might not play, there's another guy right there that he's easily a threat. So, but
the only thing, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the only thing that would scare me about the Dominican Republic is when you look at the pool stage, like you were saying, you know, 3 to 4 pitchers will be enough to get you out of your pool. 3 to 4 good outings from your starter will get you out. But when you come down to after the pool and you go to the semis and you go to the finals, you know, you really need a guy who can hang on. And it's not like we're in mid-season form with any of these players. These guys are coming off a break and they're going to have to go out there and they're going to have to throw their best stuff. So when you look at the Dominican Republic, you know, they got a guy, their rotation, and 4 guys that I have written down here that caught my eye was Sandy Alcantara, Brian Bayo, Christopher Sanchez, and Luis Severino. That's going to be their 4 go-ahead guys that are going to throw games and throw innings for them. when you look at a guy like Sanchez, Christopher Sanchez, obviously a Philly, our guy. He's a legit starter. He's a legit number one, and he can and he will throw valuable innings for the Dominican Republic. But when you go over to Sandy Alcantara, he hasn't been himself. Injuries have eaten him alive. Ever since he's won the Cy Young Award, he hasn't been the same. And they've even been shopping him around to teams and trying to get him off their roster. So it's like this could be a very, very good bounce back spot for him to let him put teams on notice. Like, I'm back. I'm in good shape, and I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna throw my best stuff. And then that could be a good sign for the Marlins. You look at a guy like Brian Bayo. He's very solid. He's young. He's been a decent pitcher for the Red Sox, but they want to see more of him, and they want him to be a top guy in the future. And like Luis Severino, you know what I mean? One day he can go out there and he can look like the best pitcher, and another day he can go out there and he could be horrible. I don't think he's a guy that you can rely on. Like, to be honest, I think he's out getting up there in age, and his best stuff might be behind him. But again, he's a veteran, and he can bring leadership to the clubhouse. So I think Sandy Alcantara or Brian Bayo is really going to have their best stuff in this tournament for the Dominican Republic to go far. I think we know what we're going to get out of Christopher Sanchez, but when you look at those other two guys, Sandy and Bayo, I think one of them are really going to have to show out.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And that's, I think, where the main question lies in a sense, where it's like, although Dominican Republic has a great offense, their outfield is great, like all the positions are very well loaded, that pitching is where it really lies. Because you look at USA and you look at Japan, how loaded their pitching rotations is. Like, one guy's not on it, they have other guys that can win them the next game. And like you said, Sanchez is their top guy. Severino begs a lot of questions and stuff like that. And then you obviously have Brian Bayo and Sandy Alcantara. I just think it's a great point that you bring up. It's like after Sanchez, there's question marks each there. Sandy might give you his best stuff. He might not give you his best stuff. He's not as reliable as he used to be. Severino is definitely not reliable. And then Bello is that guy right there. It's like, he's been good for Boston here and there, but he's also still pretty young, and it's like you wouldn't be surprised if he can't adjust to the moment. So, but moving on to the sense where I know we've mentioned them, but I actually have some questions about each of them for you. First and foremost, what do you think Team USA's expectations should be after losing to Japan 2 years ago?
Well, I think first and foremost that this Team USA has gotten a lot better. Like they've added on every side of the baseball. And when I look back at 2023 World Baseball Classic, it really was the starting pitching that literally I think tore that team apart. And I know they made it all the way to the final, came down to the last pitch, but they had a guy like Adam Wainwright throwing so many innings, and honestly, we're not going to have that this year with the World Baseball Classic. I think on the offensive side of the ball, they got younger, and these guys are most of them are in their prime. And then the rotation this year is just so deep. I know Scooble said he's only throwing one game, and that game's slated to be against Great Britain. Honestly, we probably wouldn't even need him for that game. And I don't want to get ahead of myself because anything could happen. Like you said, you need to come out and you need to be on your A game this whole tournament. But Paul Skeens, he said he's only throwing 2 games. So it's kind of like you're thinking to yourself, those are our 2 best pitchers and possibly the 2 best pitchers in the league, arguably. So that hurts a lot that they're not going to be able to go the whole tournament. But when I look here, I'm just seeing all the depth we have at starting pitching. It's like you have a guy like Joe Ryan, you have a guy like Logan Webb, are 2 of the top starters in the league. I mean, you have Clay Holmes, he's solid. Matthew Boyd coming off a good year. Clayton Kershaw, decent, but I think he's just there out of respect. I think he will throw innings, but he's kind of the only guy in this rotation that I look at and I compare him to the 2023 Adam Wainwright. He's getting up there in age. You don't know how much he has left, but I'm not sure how many innings Kershaw will throw for us, because I don't think it'll be anywhere near the amount of innings Adam Wainwright threw in the 2023 Classic at his age. And then one guy that I really, really want to point out is Nolan McLean. He showed so many flashes with the Mets last season. Looks to be the closest thing they had since DeGrom. And he'll be going hard for the Rookie of the Year this year in the National League.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of what's been talked about in comparison to 2 years ago is easily the pitching, and understandably so. You have a guy who in Paul Skeens who he wasn't even on the Pirates roster, I think at that point, and now he's pitching in the World Baseball Classic and is going to be an integral part in that. Then you also have a guy in Mason Miller coming out of the bullpen. Although, like you said, Tarek Screwball, I think they should have prioritized him pitching another important game. Maybe, for example, like a game, like I think he should have pitched a game against Mexico. I think that would have been more pivotal than Great Britain. I know prioritizing every game is important, but here's to say because like Team USA, we go back 2 years ago, there was a lot of times where they needed that pitching, they would have won them games, and they didn't have it. Having Scooball and prioritizing him in the right opportunities is the right thing to do, and I don't know if they're necessarily doing it to the best of their abilities, because he can go out there, have a stellar game against Great Britain, but that offense could also dominate. Then you turn it to Mexico. You've already used Paul Skeens at this point. You're not going to have Joe Ryan because he's hurt. You bring up Nolan McLean. I'm very excited to see what he has, but maybe he doesn't have his best stuff on that day, and that's the day you throw him out against Mexico, and your offense is very stagnant. Then you're in a situation where you're like, maybe we should be prioritizing using Scooball in a different game than this game. And obviously, it sucks that he's only pitching one game. I think it's not on him. I think it's on his management, especially Scott Boras. He wants to prioritize him as much as he can because he's in for a massive payday next offseason, so he wants to prioritize that times 10. And I just think it's in the sense where it's like, USA, we know they were always going to bring a good offense to the table. I like that you bring up the fact that they're going with a younger approach, having more guys that are very versatile. For example, although they have guys like they have Gunnar Henderson this time, they have Bryce Terang, and they have Bobby Witt Jr. And then also in the outfield, you got guys like PCA and Roman Anthony, their first taste of the WBC. I'm very excited to see what they offer, especially in the outfield, how great defenders they are. And then you have the usuals, like you got Schwarber, you got Aaron Judge, and then this year you have Bryce Harper. Obviously, he's very motivated, to say the least, on doing something impactful, I guess, in the sense. And then you have other guys like Bregman. I think he should do well. And then you bring up like a guy like Kershaw. I think they had that style on offense too with like Goldschmidt. Like, although he's still a solid first baseman, he's not going to be playing. I think Harper definitely should be playing more than he is. And Goldschmidt, it's like he hasn't been really good since his MVP season. He's kind of just there for the veteran help and stuff like that. And then also you bring up Nolan McLean. The guy I like in this is Ernie Clement. I think he's going to be able to offer a lot, not only on the defensive end, but maybe timely hitting. He's a great contact hitter. He was amazing for the Toronto Blue Jays last year. I think he just translates that right into the WBC, and I think is a very integral part of their offense.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Ernie Clement. He's coming off one of the best postseasons that we've ever seen from a player. He has the most hits in single postseason history. So it's like we know that he can deal with the moment. He's gonna go out there and he's gonna get you hits. And another guy I like that you pointed out was Roman Anthony. I mean, that guy is one of the favorites for the MVP this season. He's one of the flashiest young players that we have in the league. So it's huge to have a guy like him. And going back to the pitching side, when we talk about the bullpen, we have David Bednar, Griffin Jacks, Brad Keller, a new Philly, which is going to be interesting to see him. Like you said, Mason Miller, Garrett Whitlock, and then Gabe Spear from the Mariners. So that's a stacked bullpen right there. If a guy can't give us so many innings, for instance, like Scooble, we don't know how much innings he's going to throw. He may only go out there and throw 5 innings in a single start. They might not want to burn out Skeens. He may only go out there and throw 5 innings. So we can rely on the bullpen. And then on the catching side of the ball, Cal Raleigh coming off one of the greatest seasons ever for a catcher. And then you have a guy like Will Smith. I mean, this USA team is super deep.
Yeah, no, I think it's just like the way you look at it, it's like they have some of the core players, but then they also have it like a infusion of younger guys and also guys that were very much needed 2 years ago. But it still, I think, begs the question I'm going to ask you now with Team Japan: is this teams, is this year's Japan team stronger than it was 2 years ago?
I honestly think it is. And the reason I'm going to say that is because Otani has only gotten better. And I know he's not going to be pitching this year for Japan, but the guy is just sensational when it comes to playing as the DH. I mean, his bat is probably the best in the league right now. I mean, you're scared to even throw him a strike at this point. And then you're looking at some newly signed players to the MLB. You got a guy like Okamoto who just signed with the Blue Jays, and then if I'm not mistaken, going back to their pitching side, the MPB is the next closest thing to the MLB when you look at baseball around the world. I mean, it's the next Premier League, and as Americans, we don't get that televised here, but it's one thing to look out for is their players because they can hang with us on any side of the baseball, and they're actually bringing over their equivalent to the Cy Young here, and his name is, let me see, Hiromi Ito. He was a Cy Young for them in the MPB. So look out for him. He may be coming to the MLB soon. I think he did pitch a little bit for them in a 2023 Classic. So that's, you take away Otani from pitching, and then you bring this guy over who just had a sensational season in the MPB. We're looking to see if he can translate that over into the World Baseball Classic, and 9 times out of 10, these guys, they show up when the lights are the brightest. So I really do think that this Japan team is star-studded. They have a guy like Yusei Kikuchi, who's going to be their veteran pitcher in their rotation. I mean, he hasn't shown his best stuff in the MLB lately, but like I said with Puerto Rico, when you look at this Japan team, when they're playing together, they're like a brotherhood. So you can see anybody's best stuff. You can see anybody come back to life. You have a guy like Seiya Suzuki, Masataka Yoshida. I mean, those are guys who already have played in the MLB. We know what they consist of. And I think it's going to be scary to see them all playing together again.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think the big story of this is the influx of guys who were on the team before, but now 2 years later are now in the MLB and are adjusted to that type of style. And I just think that's what's the most integral part of it. And then you have other guys. This was the audition for most of these guys to then sign in the MLB. It's going to be this audition times 2 for these guys who aren't on the teams, and you bring up Mugami and stuff like that. I think they have a lot of guys on this team that not many people know about because they don't watch the KBB, but now we're going to be able to see these guys on a national stage and see how they perform well, especially not much, I don't think much in their bracket because I don't think the bracket is going to show, or their pool is going to show how great of a team they are, but when they get in these matchups, possibly against Dominican Republic, USA, these other teams that are loaded and they're just competing with them and they're going blow for blow for them, then that's where these teams and the fans all over the world are going to see this talent and say, oh, I want you on my MLB team. I think that's what this is whole set for, and Japan is doing it to a perfect T, and I think they're going to continue to do it in this World Baseball Classic. But as of right now, early predictions, what teams could you possibly see being in this Final Four and then possibly in the championship?
So it's easy to go out here and say, teams like USA. I think they'll definitely be in there. I think Japan will definitely be there. I want to say Venezuela, man. I think I'm going to go with Venezuela to be there. And then I think I'd be between Canada and the DR.
Okay. I honestly, I think it's going to be, I think DR will definitely be there. I think without a doubt. I like their team, and the only thing that their issue is can they get more pitching out of their guys after Christopher Sanchez? And I think at this point, unless it's a complete shocker, USA and Japan should be there. But I really think it's a toss up and between that 4th team and the 2 teams that ultimately end up in the championship. I don't think this is easy cut as USA Japan back in the championship again. USA, I think, has come back with a more versatile roster, but who's to say they face, like I said, with Japan, they face maybe Dominican Republic and they have the better team that day and knock them out. I think anything's possible. Obviously, with the sense with the DR, like they have a good team. The pitching is the issue. Each of these teams I don't think are perfect. I think Japan might be the closest to it just because of the influx they're able to bring in each year with players. But after that, it's like each team is great, but the issues that they possibly have, if they show up at any point during this pool stage or the semifinals or quarterfinals, that's where they could possibly get eliminated. And I just think that's easily possible for USA. It's easily possible for the DR. I don't know if it's the sense for Japan, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to come down to where the issues arise for each of these teams and how they're able to respond off of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing with Japan is, there's going to be somebody that steps up for them that we've never heard of and who's a star over there. I mean, somebody on that team will bring it and will lead them to the Final Four. I think that's almost a guarantee. I think with the U.S., you can also assure them that they're going to be there. I think one guy to look out for the U.S. and potential World Baseball Classic MVP, it's maybe a little biased, but I think Kyle Schwarber. I think Kyle Schwarber is definitely a guy to look out for. And then, like you said, when it comes to the DR, and that's my only question mark with them, is we know they're going to be able to do it on the offensive side of the ball. But who can be that guy that steps up, aside from Christopher Sanchez, to eat so many innings and not only eat the innings, but to be valuable and to, not allow a team to score many runs. And that's why I kind of lean towards Venezuela, because I feel like they may have a little bit more depth when it comes to the starting pitching side of the baseball. And I think a guy like Ranger Suarez can throw many more games back to back, or be able to work on less rest, because we've seen him do it before.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where it's ultimately going to come down to in the sense. And you look, it's the pitching, because it's like pitching and then you have offense. Like if you're able to have a balance of both, that's where I think you put yourself above everyone else. And it's like between Venezuela and Dominican Republic, that's why I just love that they're both in the same bracket, because they're going to have to face off. I think it's going to be a very intriguing matchup. Who comes out of it, though, I think that's where the question lies, and that's where I think the intrigue of this whole pool stage in the tournament lies. When you have a pool that you don't know who's going to come out of it, or you do, and it's going to be a battle to get there. That's where the intrigue lies, and I think that's where we're going to get the interest of the fan, really, because everyone knows what to expect out of USA and Japan. But when they were like, oh, when we look away from those teams, what are we trying to find? And if you look at Dominican Republic and you look at Venezuela, that's an intriguing matchup. You don't know who's necessarily going to win that, but you know it's going to be a good matchup, and whoever wins out of that most likely could win their group stage, because I think those two both easily have the best rosters. It's just they have some glaring holes that if they come up at any time, then it's going to be an issue. But obviously, talking about those teams, it could be anybody. What players are you looking at in particular? Or do you have any players written down that you've really been intrigued that you haven't mentioned so far?
Yeah, so for sure. So I can go I can actually go from each team. So for Canada, I want to point out the Naylor brothers, Bo and Josh. I think that they'll be able to carry Canada. Also like Tyler O'Neill for Canada. And then also in Pool A is Colombia. They're led by Jose Quintana, and a guy that may be a familiar name to baseball fans is Julio Teheran, who hasn't thrown a full season since 2023. He threw one game in 2024, so it'll be interesting to see him back on the mound. Colombia also has Gio Urshela and Donovan Solano, who are solid players. Going over to Cuba, they have Yohan Moncada, who I think will be their best player during this tournament. And then a guy who is 44, a former All-Star in the MLB, Alexi Ramirez, who hasn't played since 2016, who is still playing over there in Cuba. It'd be interesting to see him. And then for Panama, you have Armando Sosa, who's a really good player. I like him for the Phillies. And then you have Logan Allen for Cleveland, who was really, really good. Going over to Puerto Rico, the final team in Pool A. As we know, Carlos Correa, Javier Baez, those type of guys. They weren't able to get in to the tournament because of the insurance. Their teams just weren't allowing them to play. So that's kind of a bummer, but they still have Edwin Diaz, Seth Lugo, Maldonado, Christian Vasquez, like I said, Nolan Arenado, Heliot Ramos, Willie Castro. So they're going to be a team to look out for. I think they do make it out of that pool. And then one guy I really want to talk about is for Brazil. You know, Brazil is obviously a very huge underdog in this, but they have a 17-year-old pitcher who is going to be pitching for them against, you know, stars of the MLB. Obviously, with them being in Pool B, they're going to play some really good competition. Joseph Contreras, he's a 17-year-old Vanderbilt commit his fastball can range up to 98 miles per hour. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch him play. That's the guy you look out for. And I really do hope he throws a game against US because I want to see that. And then going over to Great Britain, obviously they're not the best team. This will be the game where Scooble throws. One guy that really sticks out to me for them is Jazz Chisholm. Obviously, we know what he can do. But aside from Jazz Chisholm, he's pretty much their only player. And then Italy sticks out to me a lot because Italy's that young team who can make a spark to be the runner-up in this pool, aside from Mexico. You know, and I actually may pick Italy to be the runner-up in this pool, aside from the USA. They have Aaron Nola, who we know, as watching him, as Philly fans, he's not always going to bring his best stuff. But when Aaron Nola's on, he's a very good pitcher. The only thing that hones him is the long ball. And if he can pivot from giving that long ball up, he can be a great pitcher. And followed up in a rotation by Michael Lorenzen, who is also a former Philly, threw a no-hitter with the Phillies. He's going to eat solid innings. And then they have a guy like Sam Aldeguerri, who the Phillies actually traded for Carlos Estevez. He threw a couple games for the Angels, but he didn't have his best stuff, but he's still very young, and I think it's going to be interesting to see him. So I think that Italy rotation will be enough to get them out of the pool, and then you have a guy like Kyle Teal, Vinny Pasquantino, and Jack Caglione, who are very good young players. And then you also have Dante Nori, a former first-round pick for the Phillies. So I think they're a team to watch.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's like you put it in the sense where it's like you have you have the teams. Like I like that you brought up Italy at the end because I think they definitely have the most intrigue. And although they don't have like this superstars or like they have the younger guys, and I think youth is always a good thing to have in this because sometimes youth is what can win you things. And like their pitching. Their pitching scares me a little bit. I just think, especially with the bracket they're in, I think that pitching might become a big issue for them because they have to face a good offense with USA and Mexico. So that might be what derails them. But I also think it's in the sense where it's like there's guys on there that are known. But also, I'd like that you bring up the point about Brazil and their 17-year-old pitcher. This guy's going to be able to possibly show himself on a national stage and say he gets to go up against USA and strikes out anybody from that team. It could be, I think, anybody. That's like an ESPN highlight for him right there. Like that's showing the talent he has, and it's going to show these talents to MLB scouts that so when he's ready to commit and go to the MLB, these teams are going to be trying to jump over each other trying to draft him, and I think that's a great opportunity for a guy like him. A guy that's not really known, that if he's able to get the chance against any of these guys, then he's going to be able to produce and hopefully show what he has, because those are the type of guys you want to root for. Those are the guys you want to see what they really have, and honestly, I just think if he's able to go out there and produce, show what he has, then I think it's going to be one of those where you look back a few years later and be like, wow, this guy was able to produce in the WBC, and now he's going to get rewarded in the draft because of it.
100%. Yeah, and moving on to, I don't mean to, take control here, but for the predictions for the pools, the two teams that are going to come out of each pool, I think when you point out Mexico, I think you talked about their pitching. It's just the only thing that would worry me, and I know Aaron Nola and I know Michael Lorenzen, they don't always have their best stuff, but when I look at Mexico's starting pitching, the thing that I see is Taijuan Walker's probably their best starting pitcher. You have a guy like Andres Munoz, who is one of the best relief pitchers in the MLB. So, I mean, obviously that helps, but he's not going to be able to throw many innings. And Taijuan Walker, he isn't very reliable at all. And just like Nola, the long ball haunts him. So that's why I kind of lean towards Italy to come out of that pool with the U.S. I just think that I feel like they have maybe not on the offensive side of the ball, but when you look towards the pitching, I think that they may be able to hold it down, and their offense may be able to score just enough runs to beat Mexico. When I look at Mexico, I see Alejandro Kirk, who had an amazing postseason. Obviously, their run ended on his double play, but aside from that, you know, he played great. He can hit the ball. And then you look at a guy like Randy Rosarena, who in the 2023 Classic carried Mexico. He'll be back playing. Aaron Duran is an addition for Mexico, who obviously is one of the best outfielders in the MLB. You have Alec Thomas, who is pretty good player, pretty good defender. And then Joey Meneses, who hasn't played since 2024, was another guy for Mexico in 2023 that really, I don't want to say carried them, but he added a spark, so it's going to be interesting to see him back playing with Mexico. So I think Mexico has Italy on the offensive side of the baseball, but when you look towards the pitching, I think Italy has them there. So that's another matchup that I really, really like. Along with Venezuela and Dominican Republic, I think one matchup to look out for is Italy and Mexico. I think those two teams will be fighting for the runner-up spot in both of their pools.
Yeah, no, and I think it's another good point about like Mexico. It's like they were like the team that like was just I think a lot of people didn't expect them to go as far as they did a few years ago, and it was just they had the firepower at the right time. Randy Rosarena carried them as far as he could, and I just think it's in the sense where it's like you're pitching. It's worrisome when Taijuan Walker's your best starter, and then obviously you have a great guy like you said in Andres Munoz, and I just think it's comes down to at the end of the day, they definitely have. They're definitely, I think, could be the favorite to finish that second behind USA. But if I'm not mistaken, they gave USA a run for their money a few years ago when they faced off. So it's definitely not out of the question for them to take that top spot. But USA might just be able to do enough in their matchup to prevail them to, because I think it's whoever wins that USA-Mexico matchup, I think, would definitely be on the top collision course to get it to that number one seed in the group. So, but before we wrap things up, there's anything else that you're looking forward to, any players, teams that you're really intrigued in?
So one thing I do want to just go over is I want to point out my predictions for the pool stage of things. I have right here, I think for Pool A, I'm going to say that Puerto Rico and Canada will be coming out of that pool. For Pool B, I'm going to say USA and Italy. I know we have a disagreement there. You're more towards Mexico, I'm more towards Italy. I think that'll be my prediction there, USA and Italy. I think for Pool D, I got Dominican Republic and Venezuela. And then for Pool C, I have Japan coming out. And I think the runner-up for Pool C is anyone's game. But I'll go ahead and lean towards Korea to come out as the runner up there.
Yeah, no, and I'll just give my predictions real quick too. I think I'm gonna go with the Puerto Rico and Panama. I really like those two out of Pool A, and then Pool B, like you said, I like USA, and then I like Mexico in that sense. It's just Mexico. Although they might not win that matchup with the U.S., I think they're going to keep it close and then just be able to run the course with everyone else. And then I think after Japan and Pool C, it's a toss-up. I'm just going to go for the fun of it for Czech. I think maybe they can come out of it, but I think it's anyone's game after Japan. And then I talked about it. I think it's going to be, although they might fall out of it, I think it's going to be the DR and Venezuela. Those two have me so much intrigued. Just talking about them over this episode here, I just think they're teams that if they get the issues don't come up as much as I think they might, then they're teams that definitely you don't want to face in the quarterfinals or the semifinals, I think. So, but this is all we have for you guys now. Obviously, the WBC is going to start here in the next few days. The first matchup, I believe, is in Pool C. That starts on March 5th. But other than that, I'll be back with you guys sporadically with everything that's going on. And I appreciate Kenny coming on here, giving his thoughts early on, just expecting what to see in the WBC, but this is all the time we have for you now. We'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys when I talk to you. Peace.